All right, good evening. Today is Monday, January 4th, 2021. This is a special meeting and a workshop of the Board of Education. Can I have a motion to open the meeting? Cynthia, second Therese, all in favor? Okay, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Happy New Year to everyone. Tonight is a special meeting and a workshop, really mostly the workshop. We only have very little business to do. We'll do it at the end. Really what we wanted to do today was talk about proposed capital project, really more so centered around the Cottle project, which was the one piece of the first capital improvement project we haven't addressed yet. So Russ from KG&D was gracious enough to come tonight and give us a little presentation or talk to us about proposal. So we'll get right into that, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Well, good evening. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the introduction. It's good to see you all, even from a distance, with the mask on. So I'll just try and speak up. So we call this pre-bond planning possibilities. So this is pretty much everything you didn't do, just to review it, understanding that you're going to focus on probably only a few of the things that we're looking at tonight. But we, as you may remember, after your first bond, there was a number of things that were cut back, and there was infrastructure that was prioritized. And as you mentioned, the big undone element was the upgrades to the Cottle field. So I think we're going to start right with that. And I think that you may have seen some of these sketches earlier, but this is a proposal to not only restore the grass field, but this area in light green here becomes all synthetic turf. And rather than stripe it specifically for baseball, it can be used for Little League field. It's actually half of a regulation football field or a small soccer field. So the idea is to have synthetic turf that can be used a number of different ways. And around the perimeter in the light gray is a walking track or a jogging track. That's not a regulation track of any sort, but allow people from the neighborhood or students to walk around the perimeter and provide a nice barrier. The brown rectangle is the play area, which is proposed to move sort of up the hill to the rock lot. So you'll still have the structured play area. And the thinking with this proposal was that it'll dramatically increase the usability of that playing field. The thinking after the last project was with a grass field of any level of quality, because you have so few playing fields here in Tuckahoe, that it's going to end up being mud in a year or two, no matter how much money we spend on grass and irrigation. So this allows it to be used as a middle school, high school practice field, and most importantly, for recess and outdoor activity for the younger students at Cottle. And I think one thing you've probably seen with your new synthetic turf field up here, it can be used pretty much year-round. You can even blow snow off of it and get kids outdoors in the winter on a safe, level playing surface. So it's undoubtedly more expensive, but we think it's really appropriate for Tuckahoe because you have so little outdoor space for your students. You'll also see the multicolored squares on Siwanoy Boulevard. We looked at a lot of different options for Siwanoy Boulevard over the past few years with you. We see that you have the barriers set up and you close the street off. This is really just making it colored asphalt, so it's a little bit less like a street, a little bit more like a playground. We did look at some options with pavers and curving pathways, but we really need to keep that width so you can use it for bus pickup and drop off, and that you need it for firefighting access. So we really can't cut it off entirely, but this will dress it up significantly and allow for outdoor play area that'll be an appropriate paved play surface during the daytime. There was a couple of areas of renovation in Cottle that didn't occur in the last bond because it was cut back. One was the cafeteria renovation. The cafeteria you'll see on the upper left, and you'll notice that the wall on the right has almost no windows in it. That was originally the gymnasium in the original Cottle School, and it was a multi-purpose gymnasium and cafeteria, so the windows weren't appropriate. The lower picture is an older picture of your library, so both of those things were not really realized in the last bond because they were cut out of the scope. So there you'll see some of the pricing for other toilet room renovation as well. The field improvements are just under $2 million, and the Siwani Boulevard improvements of around $160. And you may remember these renderings, but the upper left is the proposed improvements to the library, and the bottom right is the proposed improvements to the cafeteria to add windows to that exterior wall. And you can see that it would really transform that room. There was a number of other infrastructure items that were not done at Cottle. Main office renovations, additional split system air conditioning systems, some communications upgrades, abatement of the remaining floors, and an item that also was overlooked at that time was replacing the auditorium floor and the existing seating in the auditorium. And these are just things that we're suggesting be re-examined. This is not a firm proposal at this point. Again, this is just listing the possibilities to get your feedback on what you want to explore. Up here at the middle school, there was two major areas of interior renovations that were not realized. One is the room we're in right now, improving the library. You can see that that's an old photo. You did replace the carpet, and you did do some improvements with new furniture. And so obviously that number might go down because this is an old figure based on you hadn't done any of that yet. And another one is the cafeteria improvements right below us, and some air conditioning work in the new wing. And again, these are the renderings that show the proposed renovations to the library on the upper left and the proposed renovations to the cafeteria on the bottom right. There's also a number of other improvements that have been on your infrastructure list for a while, including some accessibility, security, more security work, replacement stairs, some proposed repointing, and an item that's sort of risen up in priority is replacing the gym flooring and bleachers and replacing the gymnasium light fixtures, which are starting to show their age. So again, we don't expect that you're going to do everything, but this is the sort of last line item budget that we created last year, which shows the work at Cottle and the work at the middle school, high school. The infrastructure numbers are really just a placeholder at this point, depending on how much you want to do and what we look at. But if you did everything and took a credit for the unused funding from the 2018 bond, it's around an $8.5 million overall proposal. And again, the key parts there are the Cottle Field renovation and the Siwani Boulevard improvements are just over $2 million or 2.1. And if you're going to do that, you should at least do something at Cottle, because that will bring aid to the outside work. So it's important to do something. It doesn't have to be a lot, but we know that you always wanted to create balanced proposals in the past and do something at each of your two buildings. So again, these are all the possibilities.
So when you said the rest of the infrastructure, what would you like to ask?
Yeah, sure.
The infrastructure upgrades, did that include everything you just said, roughly?
Roughly.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
we really need to look at it with you, because the infrastructure numbers were created in a 5-year plan that you had created by others in, I think, 2015. So a lot of that needs to
So is it the gym
be,
floor infrastructure?
yeah.
Oh, it is.
So-
And why did you say that that's risen to the top of the list? What
Which,
happened to the gym floor?
I just think that it looks worse than, it wasn't
okay.
anticipated in 2015. You know, we're 5 years out from your last 5-year plan.
Right.
So, and, you know, we're really just to introduce things, and if you want, if you say, we're really, you know, interested in the infrastructure items, let's dig into that. We can dig into those for you and get better pricing. Again, this is not a finished proposal, it's just a list of the possibilities, so we can get some direction on what you want to explore, besides the field.
Right.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so, I mean, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, just so everybody who's listening knows, this is sort of a pickup of the conversation that we were having right before COVID. So last year, we had actually stood up a facilities committee, and, you know, I want to thank those individuals from the community that were part of that committee. We started to do a lot of this work, and a lot of the drawings that Russ showed us on the field came out of those discussions.
Yep.
And then COVID happened, and everything sort of went to a screeching halt. So tonight, we really just kind of wanted to pick up the conversation again, because we realized that any type of capital work we want to do in the future takes months of planning, and obviously the goal usually is to get some sort of proposal, if we're going to do one, on the ballot for May, which really requires, you know, us to start doing it now. But all that being said, you know we're still in a precarious situation with COVID, and we still don't know exactly what the final financial impact of COVID is going to be on the district. And actually, I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Lee, if you have any, Ms. Lou, if you have any updates for us on that. I know the last discussion we had, we talked about, you know, the possibility of losing state aid, and maybe we would know more by the end of the calendar year. Any updates on where we are with money?
No, we're waiting to hear. January is usually the time when we start to hear more information from the governor's office. We haven't heard anything yet, and actually the business officials around the county have been starting to ask each other, what are you thinking? But we still don't know. There's more money proposed on the table for schools, and we don't know if that means we won't get cut on our state aid, so we're hoping to hear that in the next week or two, because they know districts are putting budgets together. But other than that, we're still up in the air in terms of that. And also, again, as to how long we'll have to do this type of planning for extra labor costs and extra busing costs and the things that we are currently amidst of. We will have to see how that plays out so that we know whether or not we'll have any reserves that we'll have to utilize for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So again, we're still in that kind of holding pattern, but we're hoping to know very, very soon.
Yeah, and I think it's important because, you know, obviously a capital improvement project is a separate funded project that we would propose to the community that they would vote on or not vote on, and it would have a certain dollar amount with it. But it is important, I think, to have a discussion with the broader financial discussion, because if we have more strain on us fiscally for our operating budget, that's going to put more pressure on us to take as much as we can get out of the levy increase, which then maybe changes the appetite of the community to spend more money, right? So it all does
Right
domino
together.
effect into each other for sure, even though it's two separate funding sources, right?
Right.
You know, from my perspective, I really want to make good on our commitment to the community to finish the Cottle Field, because I feel like, you know, the community put trust in us with the last capital improvement project to do all the work, which included the field. So I don't want to leave that out there, and I think everybody understands the situation that
I don't
we're
either. I
in.
think it's such an eyesore.
Yeah, absolutely.
For
And
people
also,
that live around here, especially the ones that live, what street is that, Middle?
Middle.
yeah,
Middle, yeah. Who wants to keep looking at that, because now, if, let's say we put a bond up, right? When do we, when does this actually go into effect? Isn't it the following year?
Well, let's talk about timeline, Russ, if you don't mind. So if we
Yeah.
would, if we were
Not
to
at
try
all.
to get something, we don't know what the scope is gonna be yet, but something that would include the field and whatever else that we
Or
wanna
a
do
bond?
for a bond, do we still have time to get that in place for our typical May vote? I would think we're still okay
Yeah.
with that, although we get
Yes.
close,
You
right?
you have some environmental work to redo.
Secret?
So you have to do secret again, because this proposal for the field is a little different than the last one, and for whatever else is included, but that's a very simple process. But there are waiting periods of 30 and 45 days, so there's 75 days from when you start secret to when you can schedule your vote. So that's almost, 2.5 months right there. In the past, you've put together committees, Board Facilities Committee with some community input. That's a process that seems to have worked well here in Tuckahoe, so I would assume you would do that. But you would need to form that committee probably this month and have the 2 or 3 meetings to refine this list to something that everybody felt was supportable and made sense, and then do SECRA, and you could have your vote in May, and then the detailed design work really doesn't start until after you have funding approval, and that would be, probably June through September. File it with SED in October and November, get approvals hopefully in January or February, and bid it, this time next year, which is a really good time to go to the construction market for pricing. And then the work would really be done in spring, summer of '22.
Right.
So it is a long process.
Yeah, so all the more reason why it's, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, it's still good to have this conversation now, because everything we do takes basically a full year, essentially, so.
Over a full year.
Over a year, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just have a question, just for clarity purposes, because I wasn't really involved in this, because I'm new to the board, but heard a lot of the discussion around it. So is the money already there to have the field done? We're not asking for any additional money. The money is already
No,
there.
we are asking for additional money. So
We
the
are
original,
asking for-
the original scope of the scope of the field improvement that we had in the original plan was for grass. It wasn't
Right,
going to be,
right.
we didn't have the road yet, Simonoi. So it was really just going to be essentially a renovation in kind
Mm-hmm.
to what we already had. And we had, how much did we have
400?
allocated for
I thought it
that?
was 400.
400.
400, right. So we have about 330 of that 400 left.
Okay,
So we have most of that funding left, but since acquiring the street and having further discussions, we thought, hey, let's see if the community has an appetite to do a little bit more. And from the feedback we got from the community, there is a lot of appetite to do something more along the lines of this. Also, a really good point that you made before, Russ, I think it's good to highlight, is the usability of this field year-round. Because one other big-ticket item that was also discussed back on the first project that we didn't do, and I still don't think we're in a position to do anytime soon, is the renovation of the Cottle Gymnasium and the expansion of the Cottle Gymnasium.
Right.
I think that's a big project. I think we're still a little ways away from doing
We
that.
didn't
But this
put that on there
alleviates-
because it is a very big project,
Yeah.
and you just successfully expanded the classroom
Right.
area. But that was also anticipated. And we can talk about that with the committee and revive that proposal as
Well, the
well.
reason why I bring it up is that I think it's all the more reason why it's good to do this proposal, because having a year-round outdoor space takes some pressure off of the fact that our gymnasium at Cottle is so small.
Right.
That's the point I was making. I mean, ultimately, one day we'd like to do that gym as well, but we may be a little ways off from that. But now having something that could be used year-round outside doesn't replace the gym, obviously, it's still not the same thing, but it does offer us more options for the kids year-round, so that's why I
It
think it's
also
good.
gives the rec programs better usability, because a
Yeah.
lot of times, like, the Eastchester rec has to cancel because of the fields being too wet, like practices
Right.
and stuff,
Right.
so.
So that's kind of the history, Laurie. So it was a much smaller scope project. And we could go back to just doing that scope, but I think or most of us, you know, and I say the community because we got a lot of feedback from the community, is really seems to be more in favor of doing something a little better than that.
I mean, your first proposal, which wasn't successful, you know, we were all here after the second one was successful, and a significant constituency showed up and said, you should have asked for more.
Yeah. And that was the thing that at the current
Yeah, I
time,
think
Cynthia and I were the only
we
board
did.
members who were around for that. The conundrum we were facing at that point was our first proposal got voted
Right, I
down.
remember. Mhm.
We knew how desperately we needed the space in Cottle. So we wanted to make sure we put something across that was going to pass.
Right.
So we intentionally kind of kept it as small as we could with what we absolutely needed.
Right.
But to Russ's point, when that passed, and passed pretty easily, then the feedback was, hey, you should have asked for more. So then that led to this discussion about the field, so that's kind of the history of
It's
it.
always hard in hindsight, but, you know, you want to build on your success, and
Right.
you've got that space, and everything we hear is very, very well liked and successful.
So I just have another couple of questions. One is, again, concern about the maybe carcinogens that might be emitted from, I know we did it at the high school, but, you know, the carcinogens that might be omitted from this, you know, the rubber turf type situation, and what that looks like, and making sure that our children are, you know, able to, and not just the children, but people who live in the community, because I know that when this was going down, you could smell it everywhere. So I'm wondering about, again, the admittance of toxins into our kids, the potential cancer-causing issues that may come from that. Like, has there been any more EPA testing or whatever on these artificial turfs that you're talking about?
Well, that's a big topic, and a lot of research on it. There are some better options now if you're not wanting to go with the crumb rubber infill, which has not been proven to be a problem, but there are reports and there are some skeptics about crumb rubber, and we understand that, and that's what you have out here.
Right.
For this field, and because it's for younger children primarily, you may want to do what's called a pad system, where a lot of the resilience comes from a rubber pad underneath the carpet that just has a regular sand infill to weight it down. So that doesn't have any loose rubber sticking to children's feet, and you get the resiliency through the pad that's underneath the carpet. So we've been using a lot of those systems more recently for communities that have concern about crumb rubber. For competitive sports, the crumb rubber still has the best resilience track record, and it is still widely in use on contest fields and in the NFL. And we just put those systems in down at Pelham as well. But there are some other options that can be explored that don't have any crumb rubber that's loose.
Is it more expensive?
It's a little more expensive, but this is a smaller area, I would point out, you know, so it probably will have a less overall impact. And you know, it's worth looking into, because we understand the concerns, and they surface every so often. The crumb rubber does have a high volatility when it first comes out of the bag, which is what I think a lot of people experienced when it was being installed. That fades off actually quite quickly, and it is still widely in use. But I think the sand infill over a resilient pad is a nice alternative. There are some organic infill products that have less success for resiliency. One is a ground-up coconut shell, believe it or not, but that's an organic material. It eventually turns into dirt and actually can grow weeds, and then you have a bigger issue.
But the sand wouldn't grow weeds, would it?
No, I mean, you can brush the sand. Once the coconut shells actually dissolve, and
Right.
they end up being replaced every 3 to 4 years, I think. and the resiliency on them falls off pretty quickly. Whereas the crumb rubber can be sort of fluffed up and partially replaced, and you can maintain your resiliency. But the most reliable resiliency is if it's in the pad below the carpet.
So
And
when this comes up, are there like journal articles or any kind of research that you point to in support of using the rubber?
there's tons of research. Our server's half full of reports. But I would just point out that still, the New York State Department of Health has no prohibition against it, and they're the ones who have collated a lot of these studies that really shows that there is no correlation between crumb rubber and any health issues at school locations. But that doesn't stop people from being concerned. So you can look at them and you can make a cost-benefit decision as your own board as to how you want to go forward.
Yeah, and I think that research is ongoing. I read a report in, I believe it was Forbes, I think it was put out in 2019, that talked about carcinogens, and there's still a lot of research that still needs to be had on it. What I don't want to see happen in this community is that we put this down and then, some report comes out, and now, we find out there's all kind of toxins in it that could harm our children, or God forbid, one of our students or teachers or people who live in this community are breathing all of that in. I know that it evaporated in the air after a certain period of time when it was being laid, but the fact of the matter is, in that process, people were breathing that in. So I just want to make sure that we do our due diligence there, and perhaps this is a conversation that the committee that's formed to look at this can look at some of that research and just be very, very sure that we are continuing to do the right thing when it comes to, these artificial turfs, And then the other piece is for us is that one of the things that I would like to see happen is that we have open use of our fields for our students to enjoy and our community to enjoy. I think we are the only district in this Eastchester area, which would include Bronxville, Tuckahoe, Eastchester, that does not have open field availability for people in this community who are paying taxes, and whether they have students in this district or not, should have access to the fields to play, to walk, to run. They're having to go over to Bronxville High School to walk around the track, or maybe up to Eastchester. I think that that's something we should also explore, looking at opening our fields and building a better school community. I'm aware that for some people in the area have issues with that. I push back on that. Like, when you moved here, the school was here. You moved in this community probably because the school is here, and we know that there's going to be activity, and I feel that that is something that we should look at, making sure that it's accessible to our students outside of school hours and the community, aside from the rec leagues.
Is that not to get off topic, but is that the principal reason, Ms. Liu, that why we don't allow our high school field to be used? Is it more out of courtesy for the community around the field, or is it more of a maintenance and liability issue?
When I came to the district 5 years ago, there was a committee that explored the use of the fields and the hours that it would be appropriate to use it. So that's something that even predated my tenure here at the district, but that's been the past practice for the fields.
Yeah, no, it's certainly,
Yeah.
it's worthy of talking about
You can
again.
go to Bronxville, get
Yeah.
Starbucks.
And
whatever.
Eastchester, right here at the high school, we walk
Yeah,
around
no,
the track all the
absolutely.
time. Everything over
Well, the
here is
Connell
blocked
field
up like I don't
field's
know
always
what.
been available to the community. Obviously, it's been in crappy conditions, and nobody really wants to use it. But it's never been, but the high school field has always been sort of more controlled, and that
Well, it's
discussion.
locked. The kids hop the
Yeah.
fence.
Yeah.
They still hop the fence.
Right.
So
No,
I
no, I
think
know,
that's
I know.
more of a liability than anything. God forbid one of them
Yeah.
fall over and hit their head on the concrete trying to get over the fence. It's just something
Yeah,
to
no,
think
and that
about
practice
and
predates
open
me
it
too,
up.
and I just always
Yeah.
assumed, and we probably should have a discussion about it, it was more done because of the, as a courtesy or maybe as a concern of the people who live around the field. But I'm not really sure if that's actually true, that there's
I
a
mean,
real
it was
history
always
of
a lot,
it.
I think that it's used a lot by the rec leagues, and there really wasn't much time for other people to use it.
Yeah.
And that's why the kids hop over at night. So I don't know how often it's open during the day, like for school hours, it's used for practices and things like that.
Yeah.
So I don't really know, like Eastchester doesn't have a gate around there, so I don't really know how that
Well,
works.
kind of a separate topic, but
I
it's
can
definitely
say,
something we
though,
should
for
talk
living
about.
in the community, if you're
Yeah.
gonna do that, people who live here have to teach their kids to be respectful of it, because I've watched kids ride their bikes on it, pee on it. I could care less if they're playing on it, because they should. I mean, my kids, they're guilty of hopping the fence, and I would love to see it open as well, but I think as a community, I think people need to talk to their kids on how to treat it.
So
Yeah, I
in
think
Eastchester, do they
quite
lock?
disgusting.
That's disgusting.
I have never
Yeah.
known Eastchester to lock. Maybe they
No,
do,
it
and
is
I've
open.
missed it, but I've never seen that, and I haven't
don't
seen
know
it
if
over
they
at
have one.
They
Brownsville.
do, they have a fence by the big turf field where they play the soccer. Definitely.
It's much of a fence, though.
I
That's
think that my point in bringing this up is that if we're going to make these kind of investments and we're going to ask our community to
I
support
agree.
Yeah.
what we're doing, then it should be accessible to the people who are helping to pay for it.
Yeah,
Well, I
no, I
That's
think it's a
all
good
that I'm
point.
saying.
I
So
looked
it's
into-
just something to
I
look
agree with
forward
that. You know,
to.
when we were looking at the policy, or then, I wasn't on the board at the time, they were doing the policy of, we can go on to something else, but just real brief on that. They were looking at access to the field and the policy procedure, the times and all that. And I had looked around in Bronxville, I know that they're open all day, as an example of a neighboring community, and they have a security guy. Like, if you go to walk there and there's either kids or there's going to be a game, he'll come out and, because I've been there where I go to walk and he'll say, no, there's going to be a game, let's say it's a Sunday. So my point is, I guess, that would be another thing to look into, to Cynthia's point, which is, let's open it and let's take care of it when it's open, let's have policies, and let's maybe have somebody, I don't know, watching it.
Yeah,
But
that's
those
a
are all
thought.
more
Yeah,
money,
That's
so.
a thought.
I don't think we have great camera coverage of our field. We probably
Right, you
need
need
better
cameras,
at
and
as
then
well.
people.
But it's kind of a separate subject,
Yeah.
but
Separate
I-
subject.
Yeah.
I just want to put it out there. in the
yeah, no, it's
air.
good.
Can I
Well,
can I ask a couple-
all I can say is that the walking track around this field was a result of that community feedback.
Right,
yeah, that's
right.
So that was one of the things that was included in this
Yeah.
proposal. And I think, at least for this field, one of the reasons it's not used by the community is because of its terrible condition.
Right, that's right.
And because you actually do need to keep people off of it to allow the grass to try and recover.
Right.
And if you did this type of investment, it would be basically available all the time.
Right.
And I would like to point out that that field, although you think it's accessible, if anyone pays attention, there's the men's league that
Yeah.
uses it. So
I
our kids can't use it. So
On
the
Sundays.
point being
Yeah.
about having people there to say those things, I don't even know if they're allowed to be there or not, but I can tell you
Yeah,
that
I've
they
seen
monopolize that field on the weekend. So, and it's not people from this community.
And one of the things that we found when we studied this with you is it's used for football practice, the grass field.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons this is striped for half a football field, is you could actually use this for football practice and free up this field for other
Yeah,
uses.
right.
Yeah.
A lot of ankle sprains. Just have a question back to the, personally, we dealt with that. So just a question on the construction, Russ, the part where there's the rocks, right? You're going to put a playground there?
Yes.
So the rocks are going to remain, or are you going to be
We're
down?
going to level it into a
You're going to
plateau.
level it? Oh, okay.
Just back to the synthetic turf for a minute. Playground surfaces are basically use those rubber pads.
Oh,
So,
that's what that, okay.
which is what's generally used for younger children.
Right.
So I do think that's a very safe alternative for you, and we'd be happy, and we're agnostic on which to use. We can show you the studies, and we've done all of them, including the coconut shells, and we just can report as to what we feel has worked better for different age groups. But certainly, younger children seem to have more sensitivity to anything, and the pad systems are used in playgrounds throughout the country.
Okay. Thank you.
I just had, sorry.
No.
So just on the cost, if we could just go back to that for 1 minute. So this field, you were estimating around 1.9. We have 330 approximately. These are all sort of obviously roundabout numbers. So we have some money that can take off the top of that. My question, I guess, is with the state aid. I know that they give some for the outdoor construction. What would that look like as far as helping pay for it?
Well, building aid formulas are really complicated, but what I can tell you is you get an allowance for your site work whenever you do a project of $20,000 or $5,000, I think, or more inside the building. it triggers a cost allowance, a maximum cost allowance, 25% of which can apply to outdoor activity. So you want to do something in the building. It doesn't have to be something big. And then that cost allowance will come in. And then you get aid based on your building aid ratio, which is what now, Lee?
It's about 24%.
Yeah, so you have to get it to qualify, and then you're going to get about 24 cents back on the dollar from the state. And that's not going to affect your bottom line, but it will affect your tax impact. The voters still have to vote on the full amount. But Lee and the financial advisors and our office can work out a tax impact for a proposal, which obviously that will factor in the state aid, the tax impact.
Is the tax impact then public knowledge to the people
Absolutely.
voting? Like,
Oh, yeah, we
you
would-
have access to all of that.
We would provide all the detail of what it would estimate looking like
Right.
over the course of the bond that we might have. And again, it would take a year or two for the actual full financing to come into play, and interest rates are very low now, so the full impact wouldn't be felt until the project was fully completed. So it would be something that would be explained, and then the timing of it would be also given to the community, as well as compared to other debt that might be paid off and how that might play out together. So
Right.
we would
And-
show you the whole impact.
And then do you lock in your rates? Is it like a mortgage?
When you borrow the money. So right now, we still haven't borrowed long-term yet for the project that is just about completed. And we're still using short-term, and that's something you voted on a few months ago, but we're using
And
short-term
that actually has worked to our
borrowing.
advantage because of how low the interest rates are.
Right.
Right, we're almost getting the money for basically cost. I mean, we're hardly paying any interest right now, so it's a great time in terms of borrowing and that, if it's affordable to the community.
Sorry, one last question. So the cafeteria in the high school, I remember because I was on the committee, and this was new to me, so I just might be interesting for others to hear. When you were designing the cafeteria in this building, or doing the drawings, there was something mentioned about the upstairs. Is that part of that? There was like a loft or something. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember that, actually, now
Yeah.
that you're saying.
Like there's, like in that, it's closed up, you wouldn't know it's there?
Well, what we wanted to do was return the front entry out behind that wall into service
Right.
and make a connection between this room and the cafeteria. Because right behind that wall, there's a beautiful lobby that no one ever goes in. And has access to an outdoor patio that no one ever uses. And part of the goal, especially since, the way libraries and cafeterias used are different than they once were, that actually in high schools, the most traveled pathway for students is usually between the library and the cafeteria. Because if you have teenagers, they like to eat. So if they're ever in the library, they want to get away to, they want to get to the cafeteria. So the library and cafeteria renovation through that door that's right behind you, and by reconfiguring this area up here, this balcony area a little bit, getting rid of the old elevator that's in that corner that doesn't work anymore, and putting a stair back there. So that's one of these why these numbers are sort of big for the library and cafeteria.
Right.
It was about making these two principal public areas work better together and update them.
And give the kids more room. There's no space in that cafeteria. I think that's what,
Yeah,
I think
that's terrible.
functionally, when you say the community, these kids, they sit on the floor sometimes. They're literally sitting on the floor, Indian style, having their own lunch that they bring. So, I mean, and I'm not being, but we haven't done much in this building, so it would be nice. I mean, this
Yeah.
is just, we did a lot in Cottbus.
And I think most committees, and your past committee also, wanted to strike a balance between things that affect the elementary school students, the middle school students, the high school students, and different constituencies. It's not all about sports, or all about arts, or all about academics, but you have a balance of the three, so all the stakeholders in your community can see benefit to your proposal.
Thank you.
Speaking of, what about the auditorium here? That was part of the initial.
That was part of
It
it.
was part of the.
Yeah, that was,
original.
that was about actually
art
expanding
room,
it back
right,
out
back
to where the
to
district
where it
offices
was.
are now. and then moving the district offices somewhere else was
Right,
was the
okay, I
discussion
remember
behind that.
that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And that gets into the whole district office thing.
Yeah,
Forget it,
yeah.
Let's table that.
One of them, yeah.
Not
So, I mean, it sounds like, everyone's sort of in
Yeah.
favor of doing something. Is everybody in favor of doing something? It sounds like,
I
yeah.
am.
So I think we should probably reconvene a facilities committee as soon as possible, and then strike up, get the conversation going again, and with the goal of getting something put together for the May vote.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, this is me personally just speaking my own personal opinion, it's not a reflection of the entire board, obviously, but we may have to start off with a little bit of a small bite. I think, I think we do have to be very careful about where we are right now financially and not bite off too much, because we don't really know how this is all gonna play out. So I personally would be more in favor of doing something a little more modest that gets us the feel that we want, and something else important. I love the idea of the cafeteria here.
Yeah, like,
That's
I
a
feel
big
like
bite, though, I don't know.
those are the two
but
big
Let's
things.
talk about it,
I would agree.
Yeah, but I think doing something is definitely what we should be looking to do. At least finish the field off and do something else on top of that, and just see what it's
Why
going to
don't we
cost.
see what the community, because like, right
Yeah.
now, I mean, I know we don't have final numbers,
Mhm.
but I wasn't, like, to me, that wasn't a ton of money for everything that we could possibly do.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's needed.
Do we have what kind of debt do we have coming off the books in the next couple of years? Do we have what kind of impact would that have?
Unfortunately, there's not a major impact of debt coming off until 2028,
Yeah.
but it has come down significantly since we started the last project. So there is that benefit for when the new debt comes on, that it won't be such a big impact.
Yeah. This might be the.
I also feel like the vaccine, not to like go back to this,
Yeah.
but here I go. The vaccine is here, right? And I do feel like that's gonna change things drastically and
yeah.
quickly. I don't think this COVID world we're living in is gonna be like the next school year.
No, I totally
really
agree,
don't
but I
that.
think the one thing we have to just be prepared for is if that worst case scenario happens with state aid, and we lose, and we wind up realizing the full 1 to 1.3 million impact that we think we might experience.
Worst case, right.
What that's going to wind up doing then is that's going to eat up all of our unallocated fund balance.
Well, we go to community.
That's going to put pressure on us as a board to want to ask the community for the full amount of the tax cap that we're going to be, which in previous years we haven't done that. Previous
Yeah,
years we've
right.
come
No,
down
I
below.
get that.
So then that may, if we're asking the community for a higher portion of the tax cap than we have in the past, and we're throwing on a big capital improvement bond, I don't want these things to fail.
No,
So-
I don't either, but I think by the
Right.
time that actually happens, we'll have a much better sense of.
Yeah, but the problem is we have
where
to
we're
plan
going.
for all this beforehand. So this might be the year, I don't know, I'm just kind of spitballing, this might be the appropriate year to maybe have a Plan A, Plan B proposal on the ballot. Where we have a small, because we can do that, right? We'd have the community vote on an A or a B. Just, just factoring in their sort of appetite for where we are right now. So we could have an A, that's kind of just the field and something inside that's kind of, modest, and then a B that's a little bit bigger. And depending on where we're at, holistically, the community can weigh in on that.
Mhm.
Maybe that's the right approach this
I like
time
that
around.
idea. Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
options and communication.
Yeah.
Just,
So,
We're gonna have to make
Good
sure
many
everybody
everything.
really understands it
well,
though.
that's,
Because I do feel
that was
like-
Russ's point, that the community input was very important last time.
Yeah.
Right.
Constantly talk about it and display it.
I know a lot of the community has expressed frustration over the cafeteria here, on this building. It's been an ongoing, I think there's a lot of appetite to do that, but again, money-wise, it's going to be expensive. So, again, it's all going to matter where we're at. I think at the end of the
And I
day,
do think if we do the cafeteria though, we're talking like the cafeteria with here, like making it.
it doesn't make any
one.
sense not to do one without the other, right?
Right,
That's the
totally.
snowball effect. You wind up,
Right.
that's what I'm saying. But I think, look, if we don't lose state aid and we wind up coming out pretty good, and it's May and we know that, I think the appetite for a larger project would definitely be there,
Yeah,
So,
good idea.
Well,
All
we're happy to help you and work with the committee and run through options, you get you updated pricing. So you let us know.
But not to go back to one last question I had though about the alternative options for the turf. That second option, the padding option, what is the shelf life on that versus the traditional option? Is it still the same life cycle?
The pad has a longer life cycle
Oh, it does,
than the
okay,
crumb rubber, but its replacement is much more costly.
right. So it sort of balances, is
So
it
the
fair to say it kind of
annualized,
balances
the
out?
annualized cost is about the same, but the first cost is going to be higher for the pad. But, you know, over the long term, it's about the same annualized cost.
Okay. All right.
But, I mean, we'll get the research and see what else is out there that's new. The biggest problem with the synthetic turf and public relations is that the early versions did have some problems. So, but those have been long gone for almost 20 years now. But the early versions, there was lead, there was PCBs in the paint. The crumb rubber was not virgin rubber. It was recycled tires, which had all sorts of industrial pollutants in it. So there's a lot of sort of hangover of that type of research related to it. But, you know, we're happy to go through it with you.
All right. Well, this was a good start to the conversation, and I think we do have to get it going. If we're
I did want to point out that this was originally presentation scheduled for late March. So.
Yeah, no, we kept kicking it down.
But
yeah,
when I opened it up, I was, oh, that's why we never did this.
Yeah, and then, exactly, and then this year, we kept talking about bringing you back this year, but every meeting we've had, it's been about real, kind of really important
It's all right.
stuff.
Lee scheduled me and canceled me, I think, 3 times.
At least.
It's all fine.
But
We understand.
Yeah, I think we came to the conclusion that if we're going to do something for the next year, it's got to get started. We have to start now.
You need to start now, and I do think that, you know, this field improvement would complete Cottle and be a huge community asset for you.
Yeah.
I think everyone realized that the grass field rehab was always just a Band-Aid. It would have gotten you a couple of years of use, and you would have been right back to where you were.
Yeah.
I think it would have given the community something to look forward to, because this has just been such a horrible time that we're going through, and it just would be kind of nice that we come out of it and we have something new and beautiful for all and to enjoy, you know, as part of our school community. Be nice.
Okay. All right, anything to add?
No, I think that I just would like to say, I think that Cottle desperately needs a field if we can do it. I think the cafeteria and the library and media center, the district is due for something like that. The only concern I have again is the same that you have, state aid, and if with the vaccine that it doesn't come through fast enough and we have to roll over the extra staffing that we put in, that could really affect the budget next year. So there's a lot of ifs. By May, I think we'll know better, but we should get this.
That's why I do really like the idea of an A and B, because the problem is that not knowing where we're going to be in May, we have to do the planning now. It's hard to kind of change on a pivot on a dime. So that's why I think coming out of the gate now and the concept of doing an A and a B gives us that flexibility when May comes around. That's just, we'll talk about it with the committee.
Yeah, I mean, you can vote with your budget, you can vote in late June, just before you depart.
Yeah.
You can do a vote in early September and still get construction in the next summer. So,
Yeah. That
plan,
would require us doing a special vote just for that, which
yeah,
it's not possible, but does add cost and stuff.
right.
Yeah.
But you have some options, but if you plan to get ready for your May vote, you've got some fallback options if there's still a lot of uncertainty out there.
Right.
So let me ask you this might be a really silly question. So would it be 3 options, A, B, or neither one?
Well, of course, somebody
Okay.
can vote no to all of them. No
no
is always an option.
Oh, okay, all right, I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
it's
like,
like-
you only get to choose A or B,
No,
there's nothing,
no.
you know,
You
okay,
can always
got
just
it, got it.
not vote for it. So
Okay,
it'll be
got
A,
it.
B, and no, basically, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great.
You can present
All right.
it to people as A. However you interpret it, Lori, it's fine.
Thank you very much for coming, Russ. We
okay.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Russ.
Good to
Happy
see you
New
too,
Year.
Sarah.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments on that? I think all we have is one business item, right? Just the personnel item?
And we already have, one comment, question. We already have the facilities committee in place, right? You
Well, that's a good
remember?
question. So we had one in place for last year, and actually, we haven't met in the school year. So does that committee still stand, or do we have to redo a new one?
Well, let me think, we did redo some new ones. Maybe we should have people volunteer. What do you think?
I mean, it can roll over from one year to the next. You could put out something to ask for new volunteers or with a new charge.
So the committee we had last year was 2 board members, myself and Laura, and we had 3 actually we wound up doing 4. We had 4 community members. And I actually emailed all 4 of them right before this meeting to let them know we were going to talk about this if they wanted to tune in, as I just assumed they'd be interested in it.
What do we put on
Depends
email?
on which-
I'm fine with,
like
that was a good
to
committee, we
continue.
worked well together, I think it was a good committee, I'd be happy to roll that over if they were interested, but at the same time, I want to be fair to the community if we've allowed other
Yeah,
committees to
other-
roll
Well,
over.
we did roll over the safety committee.
Yeah.
So we did the security committee, we did roll that.
I think being that
over.
we're on a little bit of a time
So-
crunch now, rolling it over would be a good option.
To roll that one over.
Yeah.
And if it worked well,
Yeah, yeah, it did, okay,
Because it's always a possibility somebody that can't do it, so then I guess
Right,
you could
right,
ask.
exactly.
We
We may
could look
have
for
somebody who
replacements
can't
that
do it, and we
way.
have to backfill it with somebody, yeah. Okay. All right, great. So we do have just one business item, which is personnel recommendations. So it is to accept personnel action items A through B as outlined below. Do I have a motion? Cynthia, second. Therese? All in favor? Okay. And that's all we have. Am I right, Robin?
We just have to close the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So that's it. So I have a motion to close, motion to adjourn. Cynthia, Therese, second. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a good night.